Good morning.
Good morning.
That ticker on anymore. Good morning. Welcome to Saga Saturday. Hello, friends. Don't mind me. My allergies are kicking my butt this week. Oh, welcome to Saga Saturday. I am Willa Brandon's daughter, your self-proclaimed Norse nerd, joined here with real Norse nerds, or just nerds. Hard to tell. You guys want to kick over your intro, and then we'll get into why we're even here today.
Sure. I'm Bersi Edvardsson, and I'm also, I'm a Norse nerd.
And I'm Dan Kinnahild, and I am a nerd of many persuasions, let's be honest. It's just
true
all over the map.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I get to hang out, though, and talk. I never remember, Claire, remember, you're mirrored.
You're mirrored.
Right.
I get to hang out with my cool friends and talk about Norse stuff. So that
I don't
makes
even
me
know
happy.
anymore. All right. So we are talking about Norse stuff. We have got part 2 of the Sworn Brothers. Who knows? We might have a part 3, a part 5. There's a lot of Thors to go over in this God-blessed saga.
Everybody has the same name.
All right, yeah. So, lovely Kinnahill did us, worked on some notes. And there's, what do you got here? 6 pages of notes. About 3.5 pages is keeping the characters straight. Because otherwise, it's a mess. It's a complete mess. So
I'd say if you were a herald and you were looking for secondary name elements, this is a great saga because there's a million billion Thor blanks, and there's a lot of things that you can use those secondary things to put. You can put basically any other name in front of it, and you've got your
they're like Lego blocks
name.
Or it's Garanimals for names. You just mix and match.
Yeah. I think in this saga, I saw almost every single male Thor blank name that I've ever read, and a couple of women's names that I had not seen before, like Thor Elf. So it's really a treasure trove.
It is.
If you are a herald and you have a client who wants to demonstrate their affinity for Thor, we have the names for you.
You could be what do we got? We got Thor Steens and Thor Brands and Thor Disses and Thor Bjorgs and Thor
Thorkel and Thorgeir and Thorbrand.
Thorkel.
And then my personal favorite, Thorgeir and Thorvaldersson.
Yes.
Always good.
Just in case you needed to really show the overbearing.
All right. So where did we leave off? We actually didn't get very far in last week because
we left off at chapter 7. So the brothers the Sworn Brothers. So we met these 2 Sworn Brothers, Thorgeir and Thormond. They have some adventures together. They swear blood brotherhood. Thorgeir at this point has killed 10 people, but it's fine.
Whatever.
It's not fine. He gets kind of outlawed for the last killing.
He does get a little bit in trouble sometimes.
A little trouble. So, but the cool part here is that we have these 2 Sworn Brothers, and it does discuss a little bit the method of how they become Sworn Brothers.
Yes.
So they cut a hole in the turf and they raise up this triple arch is what they talk about. So I think what they must do is cut 3 bands of turf and raise the arch. Anyway, they have to raise the arch and the brothers have to pass under it. And it says they walk under it. I'm really kind of curious. There's a little experimental architecture I'd like to do here.
I know. I want to go. I don't have any turf here because, I don't have turf. But I would love to try to do that because I've cut sod out and it's not super stretchy. And certainly not stretchy, but it does mention that it's held up with poles.
Right.
I don't know.
This is a thing that happens in several different sagas for different reasons. The sort of turf arches, and they often have sort of a ceremonial kind of often it's a binding thing, but it also gets used in some cases when it comes to court cases and seeing if someone's telling the truth. And God, I cannot remember if it was in Gisli's saga or Laxstyla's saga or potentially something else. But those are the two that I think one of the two that I think it's in. And where to determine whether or not someone was lying about killing someone, they were going to have him pass underneath one of these turf arches. And if the arch collapsed on him, we would know that he was lying. And if he made it underneath, he had passed the trial. It was one of the trials he needed to pass. Yeah. And they got around having to have this happen by staging a fight. And the two people who were in the brawl intentionally slammed into the turf arch before he could go underneath and collapsed it while he was going under. And they were like, well, we couldn't really tell if it collapsed because of these guys or because of him. So, and then they didn't make him do it again. And so he got out of
and that's a full on, do witches float thing.
Yeah,
that's just bizarre. All right. So we have these blood brothers who have, at this point, they've got to be what? I don't know, maybe 20-ish? And they've already killed
Thorgeir. Thorgeir killed Thormond. I think at this point, Thormond's body count is 2.
Yeah.
Thormond doesn't kill that many people.
No, Thorgeir
the very end.
Thormond is a lover, not a fighter.
Yes.
we will discover is a problem here coming up. So
yes.
I was about to say that does become an issue for poor little Thormond.
Yeah. We've got Thorgeir has just been outlawed, and the two Thorgeir and Thormod's kind of break up with each other, though they never stop being friends. They just realize they can't be together all the time. Is Thorgeir's like, hey, if the two of us fought, who would win? And Thormod's like,
I'm out, brother.
I can't do this. If you're gonna start talking like that, this is gonna end in somebody's death. So we can, and probably Thormod's thinking you've killed a bunch of people, so it's probably going to be me. So intelligently, he's like, you know what, guys, it's time to take a break. So they go their separate ways, but they do meet up once or twice again. But at this point, Thorgeir has been outlawed, and I think they're his uncles. I was going to make a relationship chart, and then I got sidetracked.
Don't even try that.
Too much, yeah.
So Thorgils and Illugi, who are the Ara sons, they buy a share in a ship for Thorgeir, and they are trying to sneak him out of Iceland while the guy who had outlawed him goes to the Althing. So they're like, we can't have you in this county while Thorsten, because of course it's a Thor, is in the county too, because he'll catch you and kill you. So we're going to wait till he goes to the Althing, and then we're going to sneak you through the county and get you on the ship. Mm-hmm. This doesn't work as well as they would like. So as Thorgeir is sneaking his way across the county, he meets this guy, Thorfi Bundle, and kills him. Because Torfi can't hear. So he sees Torfi Bundle, and he's calling out to Torfi, and Torfi is working with sticks. Mm-hmm. And the way that the wind is going, he can't hear Thorgeir. Yep. So Thorgeir takes offense and kills Thorfi. So that was rude. But okay. So then he goes along a little bit further, and his horse disappears. And this is, Iceland and its horses we talked about last time. There's horses in Iceland are wealth, and they're food on the hoof, and they carry a lot of both ritual and actual significance, right? So his horse disappears, and this is really bad. So he gets on somebody else's horse and goes looking around, and he sees his horse being ridden by this younger kid, who's herding some sheep. His name is Bjarni.
Yeah.
Yes. He is the son of Scuff.
So we've got several Scuffs at this place, though.
Yeah, we have Scuff the shepherd and Scuff the father of Bjarni.
Yes.
Right.
Super helpful. So he sees Bjarni riding his horse. There's some banter back and forward. Bjarni refuses to stop riding the horse, so naturally Thorgeir's response is to kill him.
Yeah. I mean, Bjarni's pretty upfront about the fact that he stole the horse, too.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know who owns this horse.
And Bjarni's like, I'll bring it back when I'm done with it.
Right.
But I'm not done with it yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So he kills Scuff, he kills Bjarni, and then Scuff, the shepherd, not Scuff, Bjarni's father, sees the killing and is like, oh, we can't have this. And he runs out to sort of avenge Bjarni and gets killed. Because of course.
So just on the way to leaving because of being outlawed, he has killed one unprompted and the second one a little bit prompted. Actually kind of weirdly justifiable, but like he's now killed 2 more people, 3 more people.
Just on his way out of Iceland for being a murderer. Like this guy is just not a good dude.
Thorgils and Illugi are like, look, we're gonna go settle up for the killing of Bjarni with the other scuff, but dude, you gotta go. Like we can't. You gotta go. So they put Thorgeir on the ship. They go to settle up, and on the ship, Thorgeir meets this guy named Gaut, who nobody likes. Especially not the Norwegians who want to dump Gaut back on shore. But Thorgeir's like, Gaut seems kind of cool to me, proving that Thorgeir's ability to identify good people is real bad.
Real bad. He does not have a good sense of character.
No. But that's fine. So they get on the ship and they sail first. They land at this was one of my favorite bits. So they land in Ireland, or they land in this place that Thorgeir doesn't know. And the Norwegians are like, this is Ireland. We don't want to go ashore. It's going to be a bad time for us. And Thorgeir's like, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? We kill a bunch of people before they kill us. And they're like, that's the worst that could happen.
That's the worst that could happen.
But he somehow like talks them into like gearing up. And then they look ashore and there's so many spears it looks like a forest. And they're like, or not.
Yeah,
cool.
Maybe we don't go do that.
Maybe no. Yeah. So they wait in the harbor, like they wait offshore until there's a good breeze, and they make sail again. They hit England, where everybody loves him, and then Denmark, where they treat him almost like a king, and then finally he gets to Norway, which does leave me with some questions about how he was making this trip, because why did he go from England down to Denmark up to Norway instead of just like popping across? But
it's all about where the winds blow you.
Yeah.
There's a special Old Norse word for being lost at sea, and you know what?
Right?
Yeah. So anyway, he finally gets to Norway, and King Olaf is like, you look great. You're a big man. You look like a champion, but you have shit luck.
Yeah.
Right? And so he invites him to stay with him, because what could help a king more than a champion with shit luck?
But he's a big champion, so it's okay.
Yeah. He looks intimidating. He's got high intimidation saves, but like no luck. And then Thormond, through this whole thing, we're getting snippets of Thormod's drapa about Thorgeir. And Thormod notes in his drapa that Thorgeir sailed from Iceland 7 times. So that's kind of what rounds out chapter 8. Chapter 9, we return to Thormod, and Thormod's great with the ladies, but the ladies aren't maybe great for Thormod.
He's not so much enamored with poor old Thormond.
Yeah. So there's Grima, this widow, and she has a beautiful and accomplished daughter. Oh, and she's a witch. But it's okay because she's really talented and Christianity hasn't really settled in yet.
Yeah, I love all the Christianity comments from the author. Like, it's early in the days of Christianity, so it was like,
Since Christianity was new to the country, it had not fully taken hold. Many considered such a skills to be quite an advantage. That would be her ancient arts, which is her witchcraft.
Yeah. So she's like a useful witch to have around, though it's not going to be useful for very long. So I gotta stop spoilering. Whatever.
Right?
The book does enough spoilering. Are you like there's at one point a whole verse that literally tells us what's about to happen before it does. Usually they went the other way around with it, but
so Grima has this daughter who is described as beautiful and accomplished, but a loudmouth. So we all have our faults, right? And her name is Thordis, because we couldn't pick a different
name.
It couldn't be something else, right? No, it's another freaking Thor. So Thordis, and Grima also has a slave named Kolbak. And what's interesting is some of the earlier translations of this saga are called Kolbak and the Sworn Brothers, when they're like the title translated into English.
Really?
So the, like 19th century translations I found.
Huh.
That's wild, because he's in here so little.
Yeah, I don't get it, but it was Kolbak and the Sworn Brothers. So I expected Kolbak to have a bigger
right.
Well, honestly, I thought the fact that they were sworn brothers was going to factor more greatly into this, but they spend most of the saga apart from each other.
It's true.
And don't die together at all. So
but they do, there is the proper vengeance, right? Like they fulfill the sworn oath. So anyway, so Thormod meets Thordis, and he flirts heavily with her, and he's going to visit her all the time. And her mother is like, if you want to get married, I'll say yes. And he's like, oh no.
I don't want to do that.
I just want to make eyes at your daughter and flirt and come visit all the time. I'm not interested in getting married.
Marriage just isn't for my temperament.
Right. And Grima's like, well, you need to stop visiting then, because you're going to besmirch my daughter's reputation. This is right.
And he was such a big foreboding sort of figure in the area that it was making, I believe she said, he seemed to be a troll at people's doorsteps if they wanted to suit her daughter. Big insurmountable obstacle to proposing marriage for anyone else.
Yeah. So Grima is she gets sick of this, and she does some magic on Kolbak, and she puts what it describes it as is she puts bits of fiber that she's spun into his clothing, and she's like, okay, look, Kolbak, I need you to go this way, and I need you to kill Thormod, because he's not listening to me. He won't do what I said, so my only recourse is to murder him using you. Thordis tries to save him, sort of. She's like, look, you need to not take your normal path home because the ice is thin. And if you don't listen to me, I'll be really upset and I'll know. And Thormod's like, okay. And then promptly's like, what's she gonna know?
Yeah. Leaves and goes like, how will she even find out if I went the wrong way?
Right.
I'm going
He's
my
not the
normal
boss
way.
of me.
Yeah.
So Thormod, proving once again that he's not a big thinker all the time, gets attacked by Kolbak. And Kolbak deals him a serious blow, but doesn't kill him. And then makes this announcement, like, hits his right arm. And it's like, I could do anything to you, but I'm choosing not to. And then disappears back. Thormod makes his way home, where his father Bersi is wise in the ways of healing, and sort of patches his son up and is like, I got to go deal with Grima now and like sort out what just happened, because wasn't great. Also, Grima not thrilled with Kolbak for sort of having taken mercy. And in this like patching up of the son, Bersi's like, why didn't you kill Kolbak? You're perfectly capable. Right. And he's like, I tried to kill Kolbak. I struck Kolbak repeatedly. Nothing took.
Yep.
He's protected somehow. And Bersi's like, it's the magic of
the witch. He's got it.
And then we have some poetry, which is scattered throughout this story, as we've mentioned. So Bersi, move on. Bersi is like, okay, we got to deal with Grima. He goes out to Grima's farm. There's some banter. This saga, I will say, this saga has outstanding banter.
Yes,
it really does.
The one-liners.
Right, snappy one back and forward. And I think that's really where the humor of this story is. That's why it's grouped with these comic sagas. It's got that pattern.
Yeah, there's only a couple times where it's like physical or situational comedy, like someone's ass cheeks getting cut off.
Right.
Well,
dying ass up in the water. It's butt jokes for the most part.
Butt jokes.
Well, and there's the sort of snowboarding on the spear, which I
liked that. Yeah,
humorous, but it was a visual, right? Like he's just snowboarding down the thing on his spear. So they go out there. Grima is like, it's Kolbak's fault. She takes no
responsibility
what she did. And she's like, well, Kolbak clearly is jealous of your son. He likes Thordis. He's jealous of your son's attentions to Thordis. So I'm terribly sorry about this. That's my bad.
Right.
And so
he's not here. He's left. She says that he's not here. Kolbak's gone. He's fled somewhere. I don't know where he is, And so Bersi, of course, is like, well, then let's search your your house for him, see if what you're saying is true. She's like, sure, go ahead. And she had everybody sit down, Kolbak right in the middle on a bench. And she passed her hands over him. And much like she did before he went out when she stuffed his shirt with fabric, she also passed her hands over his body and his clothes. And she passes her hands over him, and they come in and they search around everywhere. And at one point, Bercy is sitting at the bench across from Kolbak, but he cannot see him. And so he just goes, okay, I guess he's not here. And leaves.
She also gives him a magic helmet.
Yes.
Oh, I missed that part.
There's a magic helmet that makes him invisible.
Unfortunately, no spear. It's not a spear and magic helmet.
I know, but I did do the spear and magic helmet. Because how can I not? Right.
Right.
So they fail to find Kolbak, and Grima gets him out of the country. She sneaks him out and sends him off with I think Ingolf.
Yeah.
Right. And frees him as well.
Makes
him a free man.
Releases him from his slavitude.
Yeah, and so then he actually ends up making a great name for himself. He gets out of the country, he goes Viking, and good job, Kolbak. He gets a weirdly positive ending, but then that's it. So I'm still really confused about why those authors were translating it as.
It's a little strange.
I wonder. So we had talked about the last episode how we have 3 versions of this saga that survive, and so I'm wondering if there's a way to read one of those 3 versions where he plays a bigger role. I don't know. It doesn't get discussed in any of these, any of this, but I am a little curious about that. So anyway, Ingolf is gone. We basically Grima and Bercy have sort of sorted things out. Essentially, Grima doesn't take any blame for what has happened, and that seems to be fine. And Bercy's just like, "Oh, he got away."
Yeah.
So now Thormond ends up spending quite a lot of time in bed recovering. Once he's fully recovered, he goes out and meets another woman, Thorbjorg, the daughter of another widow, Katla. And she's nicknamed Kolbrun, so dark brow. She has dark brows. And Thormund develops a bit of a crush and proceeds to write her these beautiful love verses, and that he decides to call the dark brow verses.
Yes. I do want to say before that this is all taking place while he was going to go out on some fishing expedition with his father and other men. And they were staying at Kolbrun's house on their way. And when it was time for them to leave and continue on their journey, she was like, you could just hang around and stay with us, because me and all the rest of the girls, because it was a house full of women. Yeah. They were all like, we're enjoying your company a lot. And he was like, I think I'd rather stay here. And so he hangs out with them while the rest of the guys go on their fishing trip. And he stays in this house full of women for several days, writes all this poetry, sings them love songs, and then goes home. Yeah, he makes this beautiful verse called Kolbrun, for named after her. The Kolbrun, the dark brow verses, and then gets back home and is like, oh yeah, go for it.
And gives a nickname. So his mother, Thorbjorg's mother, in thanks for these beautiful poems that he's written about her daughter, nicknames him Thormund Kolbrun's poet, which is what he goes by the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. So
he's got it's a if you remember from past episodes, it's a sort of breaches out moment of coming back home, and he's like, well, I'm home, let's go over to Grima's house and check on what was her name, Thordis. Let's go check on Thordis. And Thordis is upset because she's like, you have a new nickname and it is literally you're the poet of a different woman. Right. And I heard about the poem you wrote and I heard it's about her. And he's like, no,
actually. No. Really? It's about you.
Right. I totally wrote it about you, and then I just changed it a little bit when I was over at her place, so it seemed, but no, it's really about you. Here, let me give it to you. And he recites the poem again, except he changes the names, and he like swoops out, you know, makes sure that it seems a little bit more like her.
Right.
And she's like, oh, okay, sure.
Well,
but, you know.
We talked before about how writing poetry for, you know, a woman is, that's a very courtship thing. And it's like, you can get in trouble for writing poetry, you know, love stories about to a woman that you are not, don't have that sort of relationship with, right? So the fact that he was then basically poetic two-timing, like, is that a thing? It's a thing now. The law codes, I mean, like, there's pretty harsh punishments for writing love poems to the wrong woman. If someone takes offense. So kind of stuck his foot in it there. Yeah.
So he rewrites the poem about Thordis, gives Thordis the poem, but then he falls asleep. And in his sleep, Thorbjorg Kolbrun comes to him in a dream, and she is pissed because she heard what he did with her poem. And she says, I will cause you great eye pain, unending eye pain. And we talked about the eyes as various, like, as a sort of magical thing, right? So unending eye pain, unless you publicly recant what you told to Thordis and declare before witnesses that you wrote that poem about me, Thorbjorg. And, you know, this pain won't abate until you fix your mistake. You fix your screw up there, buddy.
There's a trend
with great eye pain.
And there's a trend of pain in the eyes or pain behind the eyes being a sign of bad character as well. And so, like, this was something that if he said to anyone else, they'd be like, oh, well, then what's wrong with you? You know? And so he's like, well, I do have horrible eye pain, and it seems to be getting worse. And I think I remember reading that it seemed to be bulging. His eyes were like bulging out of his head. And who was it? Bercy? Bercy gives him advice. It's like, you're going to lose your eyes if you don't do what she asked. And so
I'm actually going to read that really quick because I know, maybe I have a horrible sense of humor.
No, please.
Pharisee says, these women of yours are no good for you. One has given you such a bad wound that you will never recover from it. And now you can fully expect to have your eyes burst from their sockets. My advice is that you alter the poem back to its original state and rededicate it to Thorbjorg Kolbrun, the poem you composed for her. Thormond's like, all right, that's a good idea. I'm submit to your judgment. Yeah. So then he publicly confessed that how he changed the poem. And then in front of witnesses, he gave it back to Thorbjorg, and his eyes magically were fine. So, yeah.
Basically,
no poetic two-timing.
Yeah.
Right. The lesson we should take from this is if you write a poem for one woman, just leave the poem in her name. If another woman is upset, write her a new poem.
Yes.
Or top tip, pick a girl.
Yes.
Well, that's just
commit.
See, that it's that fear of commitment. You know, some of us have a fear of commitment and we just won't put a ring on it. So just,
he did say his temperament is not for marriage, you know?
True.
He went into it.
I would just like to say I've spent the last 4 days every day on the phone with my sister as she works through her panic about picking one of two possible roommates. And I feel like a certain amount of the lesson in this could be applied. Just pick a roommate.
Pick a roommate.
Just pick one and go, and then you're done. And then stop worrying about it and move on to a new panic. Anyway.
All right.
Get that off my chest. So we move on. We're back to Thorgeir.
Back to Thorgeir in Iceland.
Oh, yes. And I mentioned this right before this episode, but there's a fun way for you at home if you're thinking, Thor who? And getting a little confused about who's who. We know that one of these sworn brothers is a little bit more murderous than the others, and that is Thorgeir. And Gear means spear, and he's the one who has this very intense barbed spear that's very large and everything. And so when you think, Thorgeir has a spear, he's the killing brother.
Yes.
And then our lover boy is Maud at the end, Thormond. And now you have a mnemonic.
Look at you. I love linguists. You guys are the best.
So Thorgeir has left. He takes leave of the king, goes back to Iceland, where he proceeds to get in trouble again.
Was this the last one? Was this the one where the king was reluctant to let him go?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Right. Just making sure.
So Thorgeir's back in Iceland. This is just a real short chapter. His horses are grazing on this guy Hekil's Snorri's land. Snorri's not pleased with this. This is Snorri's land. Those aren't Snorri's horses. So they end up getting into a fight about it because of course they do. And some of Snorri's farmhands get involved and Thorgeir basically just kills everybody. Because why not? And then he's like, should go back to King Olaf now.
Right. Yeah. Just kill some people, but I gotta go. So I actually flagged this as I loved the description. Like this fight, the fight choreography in this scene is brilliant, right? Yeah. You got where to go? There's a point where it is Thorgeir defended himself deftly and then attacked with the strength and sureness of a lion. They were soon wounded because they only had short-shafted axes, while Thorgeir had a spear with which he lunged at them fiercely again and again. Snorri and his 2 men retreated back into the sheep house. Doorway was low and narrow and was therefore harder to attack from there. But Thorgeir ran up onto the roof and began to tear off the turf. But Snorri's spear met him where he had made an opening and he was wounded, though not seriously. Then Thorgeir threw down his spear and took up his axe in his right hand. Snorri attacked him fiercely through the opening in the roof. Thorgeir deflected the blows with his shield and axe, seeking only to cut the shaft from Snorri's spear, and he did not stop until he succeeded. As soon as he had broken Snorri's spear, he jumped in through the opening with both axe and shield and struck him such a hard blow to the head that it cleaved right through and killed him instantly. Then Thorgeir turned to Snorri's farmhands and attacked them with great agility, defending himself with his shield and striking at them with the axe that had bid many a man good night. By the time he was done, he had slain both of them. And then he got on his horse and rode out. Great fight choreography here. I love it.
There are 2 things I want to mention about this. One, there are a great number and very well composed doorway battles in this saga. So if you are interested in really interesting little battles in the doorway and dealing with physical obstacles, there's a lot of in a lot of sagas, things are just they fought each other and one of them was better. In this one, there's a lot of
back
using our environment. So that's really cool. Recommend this saga for reading about those. And then second, it just keeps getting rephrased, but the saga author here loves to talk about how Thorgeir's weapons are going to bid someone good night.
Yes.
And put them to sleep and put them to rest. It's really nice.
He's very giving of his Sandman qualities. He's
So the things that I think thus far that we've identified that the saga author really likes to talk about: Christianity, just toss in some Christianity, Thorgeir's awesomeness and how brave Thorgeir was, because that's popped
like
up
a lion
again, where they're just Thorgeir's so brave, guys.
Super brave.
Thorgeir's weapons, especially his spear, which it could be we have a little crush here on Thorgeir. Let's have a moment, right?
You would think we would talk more about Thormond's with his reputation,
right? But apparently there's a little crush on Thorgeir, and then the doorway battles. I don't know what's going on. And then so we've taken care of Snorri and his farmhands, and then we briefly get introduced to Snorri's son, who is unimportant elsewhere in the story. His name is Helgi Hvetti. He's got a lot of white hair, so he's Helgi the White. And he has, there's this brief aside about a land deal that he does with Thorstein Egilson. that Eggles.
That
Egglesson,
Eggle,
right?
yeah.
And that's really the point, is we just want to make sure that we've got the big name, Egil Skallagrimsson, gets tied
in somewhere. And it's not even as a relation. It's just by the way, the son of the guy that
he killed
did a deal with a famous guy's son. Like,
literally.
Yeah.
Right. That is like the lamest name drop of all name drops.
But it is. So the other sagas that we've talked about in sort of this series on the comic sagas, a lot of them are very clearly fictional, right? Like they don't have that tie-in with the broader Icelandic family sagas, the broader history. This saga goes out of its way to tie itself in.
Yes.
At the beginning, we had Grim, we had the murderer, Gisla. We had Gisla.
Yeah. Grettir, not Gisla.
Thank you. We had a brief tie-in with Grettir's saga. Now we've got this brief tie-in with Egil's saga.
We've got mentions of Olaf Peacock and his family from Laxdæla saga. We've got people from the saga of the Confederates.
Yeah. Like, it does tie in bits and pieces of other sagas that we have. Yeah.
Lots of the place names, lots of the people. But if I remember correctly, these people are not actually real still, right? Or are these?
I think
they might be real.
Might be real.
I went into this thinking that they wouldn't be because of the nature of the rest of the sagas that we've had, and so I want to look into that a little more.
Yeah, like nothing about this suggests that they aren't. Like nobody's popped weird special talents. Nobody's gone weird special places. Everybody's doing very standard saga stuff. Like, I go to Norway, I go to Iceland. I go to Norway, I go to Iceland.
And there aren't even.
I go to Ireland and turn around because they're scary.
I thought things would get the humor was going to come out in crazy situations, like sarcastic Holly constantly doing weird trickster god type stuff.
There's not even a battle with a poop demon in this thing, so it must be real.
Yeah, so it feels pretty realistic.
It does for a murderous.
We are now back in Norway.
Yes.
Thorgeir we meet a gentleman named Thorgeir. Thorgeir loses his temper at a market and wounds one of King Olaf's men fairly grievously, though I don't think he actually kills him. And King Olaf is like, hey, Thorgeir, you have a violence problem. You want to go put that to use against this guy, Thorgeir, who's gone back to Iceland and who did me some naughty. So Thorgeir's like, sure. And goes back to Iceland. Now we introduce something else entirely. Thorgeir goes back to Iceland to build a hall at Reykjolr with this guy Veglag, who we have never met before. Again, weird names. Cool. So Veglag the carpenter. They go back, they're building this hall, and eventually they're like, we've been building this hall for a bit, we should deal with Thorgeir. They go to Thorgeir. Thorgeir challenges him on behalf of King Olaf. There's some banter. But then mid-banter, Thorgeir's just like, I'm done with this, and kills Thorgeir.
Right. He does that a lot. And this is, again, standing in a doorway. He is constantly standing right outside, and they mention at two different times, but I believe it's probably true for all of them. He's often standing outside in the daylight, where is inside with no windows and everything. It's very dark. And so the people who are inside are having a lot of trouble seeing because of how bright it is. And he's silhouetted against all this bright light, coming out of a movie theater. If someone had an axe standing right outside the door of a movie theater, you'd be in a sorry state. And so he's just standing there often, and then he just constantly is just stabbing people through the middle halfway through their sentences because he's
it's true. Yeah, and this specifically says, then without warning, Thorgeir thrust his spear into Thorgeir's chest and pierced him right through. Thorgeir fell backwards into the house dead. So I was just thinking about that, and I think I'd have to do a little bit more digging, but if I remember correctly, there is more bad juju, more punishment if you kill a person in their home or in their own building than if you do it out in public, right? So with Thorgeir being outside of the house, even though he's attacking someone in a structure, I think he gets away. It's a little bit less bad. I'd have to deal. I like that's tickling like the back of my brain somewhere, but I may also have just made that up because I have been reading so many sagas that it makes sense to me that would be. I don't know.
Let's get out Yarnsiva and check those law codes.
Right?
The peacemaking and blood taking would probably.
Yep. I know. It's right here. I'm gonna.
So then we have a little clutch moment. He's killed Thorgeir, but nobody really that was a valid killing, right? So there's no thing. But then all of a sudden there's a bunch of thefts at Reykjaholr where they've been building this hall. And Illugi and Thorgils, the Ara sons, the I think uncles, decide this is bad. We're going to search everybody's trunks, including their own. So they search everyone. They search their own trunks, visibly in front of people to demonstrate that they're not the thieves. But then we have Veglag, and Veglag refuses to allow his trunk to be searched, which here was the hint, was that Thorgeir liked him. That's how we kind of knew going into this that Veglag probably wasn't a good guy, because the only good guy that Thorgeir seems to like, or two of them, right, is King Olaf and Thormod. Otherwise, Thorgeir has the worst bad guy radar. So Veglag eventually, they manage to they search his trunk, and it turns out, oh gosh, Veglag was the thief. Shocker.
And he's got. I think it's pretty impressive because one of the whoa, what's going on here? Things about all these thieves, all these thefts was the fact that none of the locks were broken into, and they find in his trunk not only some of the stolen items, but keys to every single lock in the area.
Yes.
And I was like, how'd you get those? When did you get those?
What do you think about Viking Age keys? They're not super.
They're not super strong. They're not
the hardest to replicate because they are just. I don't know what a Viking Age lock looks like. I'll be the first to say that, but I have seen some medieval locks that. Oh, please, yes. I have seen some medieval locks, and from what I've seen of the keys, they're often like. There's like a shaft and then like one or two little tines coming up. All it needs to do is push up like one thing or slide. Locks are so cool.
The locks are not for keeping something secure. It's for keeping the lid closed. Like it's.
I love keys and locks. Like I have kind of an obsession with Viking Age keys and Viking Age locks, and I don't yet have a lock because those are a lot harder to find. But so that's
so pretty.
Right. And so, but the element of the key that makes the lock function is pretty rudimentary.
Very simple.
Right?
Yeah. Very
so
simple.
Again, so there's another one.
I like that one.
Right. Like this would be something, and you wouldn't necessarily have, like you could make it kind of unique, but
not
presumably
really.
This key could open multiple locks, right? Because what it's doing basically is just saying, okay, I need you to push up at this part, and that's going to pop the lock open.
Yep.
Right.
They get a little bit more complicated. So like this one's going to catch two different things, and basically it squeezes it together so like you put it in like that and lift up, and that squeezes these tines that are pressed together, and then it allows you to open the lock. And then
that's a Viking Age bottle opener. Yeah, exactly.
It is. It totally is. And then that's the last one I've got. This one, obviously, probably the most basic to copy because it's just it's a 4 tines, and all it's doing is going into the lock like that. And I think it operates on a lever system.
Right,
makes sense.
So
we need to get you some locks.
Yeah, I know. I keep trying to find locks, but they're really expensive. And that's fair. Like it takes a lot of work, but also work. So
yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
So they catch Veglag.
Keys useful, neat, but they're not ultimately like when they say he has keys to every lock in the district. I don't imagine that he's got that many unique keys. It's probably a case of like there's one locksmith in the district who makes like 6 different locks.
Yeah.
And if you have 6 keys, you can get into all the locks he's made.
Right.
So anyway, Veglag turns out to be the thief, and Illugi wants to kill him. He's like, he committed theft. Theft is a killable offense, especially on this level.
Yeah.
But Thorgeir's like, Thorgeir, no, you can't kill my buddy. He's been helping me build this thing. And so he takes him up to Thormod and Bersi's place to hide out and stay while sort of the heat dies down. And at this point, we have what I have decided to refer to as the Angelica incident, which I think, Bersi, you had some notes on. So do you want to explain what your notes were talking about? Because I did not.
I had notes on it?
At the very top. It was something about, like, a bit of reference to homosexuality.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
I read that that was in the intro. Gosh, that slipped my mind completely before today. I read that weeks ago. I'm gonna go find that part in the intro. But the Angelica incident, in short, is sort of like what happens in the saga is that which one was it? Thormod?
So at this point, Thorgeir and Thormond are back together again.
Back together, right. So which one of them was hanging from
Thorgeir grabs the stem of an Angelica plant. Well, he's up on a cliff and he starts to fall, and he grabs the stem of the Angelica plant to keep himself from falling. Thormod is able to rescue him, pull him up off the cliff and save him. And this, according to the introduction, this undercuts heroic ideals, and it does, the story does take a brief digression at this point to talk about how brave Thorgeir is, that he wasn't afraid of anything, even death, because we're real obsessed with that. But also probably indicates homosexual love.
I guess potentially where he reaches down. So he's on this cliff face, the ledge that he's standing on while he's gathering Angelica breaks. He starts falling, but he grabs on, and he's so fearless. He's so brave, whatever. Right. This doesn't faze him at all. He doesn't even call out for help or anything. He's just holding on to this Angelica as it's slowly getting uprooted, like in a very dramatic scene in a movie where you keep cutting to the roots pulling out. And he's just like, oh, I guess I'm going to die. I think they said he's 60 fathoms above
60 fathoms above the rocky beach.
Yeah. And so it's like, this is the end for him. He's not even calling out. And then Thormod comes up to the top of the cliff and looks down and was like, oh, hey, buddy, you gonna come? You done with the Angelica yet? And he's like, just got to pull out this last one.
Yeah. I'll have enough once I've uprooted this piece I'm holding on to.
Again, most of the humor in this is through the dialogue.
Bastard. Yeah. Exactly. That's the references of,
And then Thormod reaches out to him and grabs his arm and pulls him up. I was trying to figure out, because I read this in the thing, and I am so sorry, I forgot to do my extra research to actually figure out what was going on here. Why the intro says that this is indicative of homosexual love. Of course, they cited their source in the back, but the only article I could find was in Icelandic. And so still trying to figure that out. But if I had to guess, it is mostly because we've got this is total extrapolation. I'm thinking it might have to do with the fact that like our sort of weaker character, who's like Thormod, like saves him. It might have something to do with Angelica itself as a plant. It's like a medicinal plant that's found all across the globe and usually has like some sort of names that reference some sort of sacredness, like Angelica, right? Because it's got a lot of different sort of like, I think it's an astringent and like all these other things. It's got a lot of medicinal properties. So mostly I'm bringing this up because I was confused. I don't know what's going on with this is the most frustrating sentence in the introduction for sure, because it just says that and then moves on as if it's obvious.
Don't we all know? Yeah.
Well, I quick Google is not providing me any useful answer.
I know. So apparently Thorgeir and Thormond and Grettir the Strong all were staying at Reykjahollar at the same time.
Not Grettir. Grettir wasn't there.
Yeah.
No, that's the hypothetical if Grettir was there. Because Grettir was already dead, wasn't he?
No. Right here, people say that all three men, Thorgeir, Thormond, and Grettir Armisen the Strong, had stayed at Reykjahollar at the same time, and that the combined strength of the two sworn brothers almost equaled that of Grettir.
Oh, I thought that was if they did. I just read it wrong. Sorry about that.
Okay. And then it goes on that they were asked at the Althing whether the men he had taken in for the winter were not the bravest in all of Iceland. And Thorgils says, because Grettir was afraid of the dark and Thormund feared God. So I'm Thorgeir, however, he said he feared absolutely nothing and least of all a sudden catastrophe. So I love that Thorgeir, he's not afraid of anything, least of all a sudden catastrophe. Like that's the last thing on his mind. Seriously?
So brave. We've now really established the bravery. And then Thorgeir takes Veglag, who has kind of worn out his welcome, and they sail for the Orkneys. Thorgeir, so brave, again, identifying him so brave. He goes on to win much renown with Rognvald, Earl of the Orkneys, and his quest to free the Orkneys from all these raiders. Veglag, meanwhile, goes to Scotland, becomes a notorious thief, and is killed.
Yeah.
So,
oops.
That ends well for Veglag. There's a whole bunch of these characters who, like Kolbach, get sort of introduced. We get a little play with them, and then they just go off. And we just get like the end of their story. Like he becomes a great Viking, or he goes to Scotland and becomes a notorious thief and dies.
If this were an 80s movie and we had like all of these little epilogues happen at the end, it'd be like 30 minutes just of epilogues.
Right.
And this saga does carry on like that for quite a like there's a lot of points where you're like towards the end, you're like, please just let's wrap this up.
Let's wrap it up, and then there's a second ending because there's multiple manuscripts.
Right. So Thormund, as we've talked about, Thormod wrote this drapa of Thorgeir's life, after his death. So this verse, it's just, and I love that these verses of this drapa are just kind of like plugged in here and there. The god of sword play, I shall tell, fearless in battle, went on the way of horse with Rogmald when he wanted to do battle. The son of Havar, dauntless warrior, spared little the lives of men, threw himself into the fray eagerly. His deeds will live all the longer. That's some romance right there. That's the Angelica homosexuality bromance. I don't know.
There's part of me that wonders. So I think if I remember correctly from the introduction, it talks about this drapa it survives to us in this, but it's got the elements that indicate that it was probably a historical drapa, right?
Right.
So there's part of me that wonders, like, did this saga basically get composed based on the drapa because they thought for a while that this was a very old saga, then it kind of got sort of like, no, it's just weird and it's newer. So did it really just get drafted based on the drapa in the 13th, 14th century?
Right. I would say, so what this feels like to me is kind of like a yes and situation. So like, I think this style of having prose that is interspersed with poetry, often like one specific drapa or other long form poem that keeps getting put in after or just before an episode has happened that the drapa directly references, right? And so like what that can sort of be, just like in this is something that might be very familiar if you've read the prose Edda and the poetic Edda. You'll notice that in the prose Edda, like he's constantly referencing back to the poetry. Now, of course, the Eddas are a poetry manual, and so there's like a slightly different bent going on here, but like it is very common for saga writers to go like, no, what I'm saying is true, and here's how I prove it. Remember that old poem? It's right there in the poem, and the poems don't lie. And so I would say that it feels very much less like they composed the entire story based off of a poem, and more like people kind of knew the different episodes of this story, and they also knew the poem, and then someone was like, let me conglomerate these and put them all into one place, and give you like the definitive, here's what happened.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Thorgeir then goes from the Orkneys back to Norway. He hooks up with King Olaf again because they're buddies. And in the spring, he's like, look, I want to go home to Iceland. Illugi, you're going back. Can you take me with you? But Illugi's like, look, you have developed a bit of a reputation in Iceland. You should stay here in Norway. And Thorgeir's like, I want to go anyway. And the king is just sort of, okay, guy. Peace out. So Thorgeir gets passage on a different ship, and we get to meet the guy with my favorite surname, possibly in every saga ever.
Wait, just really fast because the name is too good and I want it to have its own spotlight. The king does, though, in fashion of many of these saintly kings, Christian kings. This is King Olaf, right?
Yeah.
So definitely with him, he does another little prophetic thing, and he says, if you leave me right now, we will not meet again. He's like, no, I intend on coming back next summer. And he's like, we will not meet again.
Not gonna happen,
your doom. Please stay here. And he's like, no. And he leaves. And sure enough, but yes, please continue with the best surname.
The best surname ever.
So we meet Helgi Seista. How do we say that?
Yeah, Sesta.
Wait, I want to see it spelled. I'm sorry. I'm going to find it real fast.
Page 51 of our, or it's in the notes. Yeah.
Hey, I was like page 51 of the notes.
Yeah.
Here he is. Seista.
So seal testicle.
Seal testicle. How do you get the last name Seal Testicle?
I don't think they ever quite explain.
They don't.
He's no, they don't ever.
No, it just says that's a weird nickname, and Helgi's like, all right, well, yeah, okay.
And
he don't like, tell us why.
Yeah, I want to go abroad with you next year and work on your ship, and I'm a real fast guy. Nobody can beat me running. And he's like, well, have you ever competed? And he's like, no, I just know I'm real fast. So that's basically what we know about Helgi at this point. He's a quick dude. He's got the weirdest fucking surname on the planet. And he wants to work for Illugi. And then next chapter, we meet a whole, like the next chapter starts with just like 6 introductions back to back to back to back.
Mm-hmm.
We meet Kalf and his brother Steinulf, who are good men, who are well known in the district, and they're pretty cool. Thordis, another Thordis. This one is Thordis the widow. She has a son named Eyolf and a kinsman, Thorgeir, who is the foster brother of Eyolf. And there's this other unnamed old woman who Eyolf and Thorgeir are constantly playing around her. Thorgeir the second. We're just going to call him Thorgeir number 2. So Eyolf and Thorgeir number 2 are constantly playing around this old woman, and they mess up her work, and she finally loses her temper, and she's like, look, guys, you're going to come to a messy end. Bad things will happen to you. And I've prophesied this. And they're just like, whatever, yo. And then we also, I think this is where we return to Gout. We've met Gout before. I think.
Mm-hmm.
So we return to Gout. And we have this little incident with Gout and Thorgeir, where they're camping on a beach, and Thorgeir is like out looking for firewood. Like there's very little firewood because I don't know if anybody's mentioned this, but they deforested Iceland real quick. Yeah. So they arrive like right around, I think it's 842 plus or minus 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
And by the 900s, they have deforested
like
the island. 50
years it took them. Yeah. To just deforest the whole damn island. Yeah.
And they're to this day trying to reforest it. And it is one of my favorite things in the world. You drive around Iceland and there's these perfectly square patches of trees, like on the side of mountains, where somebody was like, the government's like, we will pay you this amount of money if you plant trees on your land. And so the farmers are like, we need to plant 1/4 acre of trees. There's your perfect one.
There's your 1/4 acre. Yep.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the greatest thing. So they're out looking for firewood. And Gout is like, I see some firewood right here. And so he takes Thorgeir's shield and the shaft of his spear and chops it up and puts it under his cook's fire pot. And Thorgeir gets back and he's like, where's my stuff? And Gaut's like, it's under my cook's fire pot. And Thorgeir is not what they would describe as best pleased.
Yes.
And it's like probably attacks Gaut, but the guys come and they hold them back and they're like, don't kill each other. That's wrong. But what's interesting to me, Thorgeir has done so much violence with the spear, and now the spear is destroyed. So, and there's part of Thorgeir's name, right? So there's a little part of me like, is this a little foreshadowing?
Right.
Like, are we, you know, what's going on here?
Right.
So they pull them apart. And then that night, Thorgeir is like, I'm still pissed. I'm still real pissed. So he goes to Gaut's tent, sneaks into his tent at night, and clubs him with his axe. Like, splits his brain in half.
Well, doesn't he do the same thing to him first, though? He first gets back at him by taking his spear and his shield
and puts it under his cook pot. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So they do a back and forth, and then they get mad, then they fight, then they get pulled apart, and then
the axe through the head.
Yeah.
I apologize. I skipped that. So then he gets killed, and we do get a brief another bit of poem. And then we move on to chapter 16, which is where my notes end.
And also we're at an hour now.
We are.
So I think we might be going to Sworn Brothers Part 3 next week.
I will say, this is not the longest saga, but it is a saga that has about 500 million very short episodes. And,
and all of them are super cool. Like, there's a lot going on in this thing. Some of the other longer ones you can skip over entire like chapters. You're like, oh, it's it's like in Lord of the Rings. They're walking, right? No, this one, almost every chapter, there's like something cool happens. So I think we're gonna have to go to episode 5,000 with this one. Not as bad as Eagle, I suppose.
One of the things that was so fun, like, this is a really fun saga. Like, I highly recommend people read this, even if you get through just a few of the different chapters, because you can just read like a chapter and then you're like, oh, that was fun, and then leave it. The thing that struck me most while I was reading this, I know we're going to talk about it more, but it kept feeling a lot. It felt a lot like a TV show in its pacing. It felt like we kept having scenes cut back and forth between our brothers and like, let's introduce this new character who's only going to be important for this episode.
Right.
But it's going to be a fun little romp in this episode. And then it wraps up and we move on and we never talk to them ever again.
Right. You're right. It is like kind of like a good TV series, and it's in that there's an overarching theme of these brothers' lives as they bumble and fuck up Iceland. They just murder. Well, Thorgeir murders his way through all of the Scandinavian countries. But then there's within the episodes, there's little bits, and I'm telling you, the fight choreography, the way things are written. Yeah, we could make a TV show out of this, and it would be.
I've got plans.
Only interesting to us, but what are you gonna do? So, all right.
So next week, I think next week we're actually, Ula's not going to be with us.
I'm not here. I am going to be out of town at a memorial next week. So you guys are on your own.
Yeah. Well, and I think next week we'd actually talked about doing kind of a special side episode because Bercy's going to be away from his usual books. So I think next week we're actually going to do a little bit of talking about dead languages with the two of Bercy and I, and then we'll get back to the Sworn Brothers, and then I think we're going to go to, after that we'll go to every other week for a bit and see, because we need a little break from the reading, frankly.
It was height of the pandemic was a different time.
Yeah,
and now lives are getting a little bit more
right
busy.
Now that I'm not just sitting in my house all of the time every day. A
little harder to do the readings, and goodness knows I was already procrastinating enough on them. So.
So
yeah, and I'm sure our viewers have seen our notes, and our in-depth analysis has gone kind of taken a nosedive over the last few months. So we're gonna go to a more
a leisurely pace.
Leisurely pace. Yes.
So to recap, the 7th we'll be taking a little break from the Sworn Brothers to talk about Dead Languages with Kunahild and Bersi. And then the 14th we'll wrap up the Sworn Brothers, and then we'll be off the 21st.
Yep.
And we'll talk about whether or not we're going to be off the 28th, because then we'll have done 2 episodes in August, and we'll figure it out. We'll keep you guys in the loop.
Yep. You'll know when we know. How's that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, my fabulous nerd friends, and we will catch everybody next. Well, you guys will catch everybody next week.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.